Oscar Franklin Smith was convicted of a serious crime, capital murder in Tennessee. He was sentenced to death for this offense. Initially, he was supposed to be executed on April 21, 2022, but Governor Bill Lee granted a temporary reprieve because of issues in the lethal injection process. As of now, Smith is still on death row at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution, with a new execution date set by the Tennessee Supreme Court for May 22, 2025. How grievous was his crime? The tragic, brutal, and bizarre murders occurred at approximately 11:20 p.m. on Sunday, October 1, 1989, when the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department received a 911 emergency call from 324th Lutie Street, Judy Smith's home in the Woodbine section of Nashville. On the tape of the call, which was later technically enhanced and played at trial, a young male voice, identified at trial as that of Jason Burnett, is heard crying, "Help me!" In the background, another male, Chad Burnett, is heard shouting, "Frank, no! God help me!" The call ended abruptly with Jason stating, 324th Lutie Street. Officers dispatched to the scene arrived at the house 5 minutes later. They knocked on the front door and received no answer. Everything appeared quiet, so the officers assessed the situation as a false call and left. It was not until 3 p.m. the next day that the bodies of Judy, Jason, and Chad were discovered. The body of Chad was found lying face up on the kitchen floor. The room was a wreck. The phone had been ripped off the wall, and large quantities of blood were on the floor and wall. In all, a tool similar to an ice pick and often used in leatherworking was found in the room. Chad had been shot 3 times, in the right shoulder, the upper chest, and on the inside left eyebrow. The last 2 wounds were contact wounds and had been fatal. Chad had also been stabbed several times in his chest, back, and abdomen with a sharp needle-like weapon, such as an ice pick or awl, and with a knife. His neck had been slashed, and there were defensive wounds on his hands. All of his injuries had occurred before death. Judy Smith's body was found lying on its back on a bed in the front bedroom. There was blood splattered on the paneled wall next to the bed. She had been shot in the left arm and the neck. The latter wound, caused by a gun fired from a range within 2 feet, had severed her spinal cord and produced instant paralysis, rapid unconsciousness, and death. Shortly after death, her neck had been slashed, and like Chad, she had been stabbed with a knife and a weapon resembling an awl or ice pick. The medical examiner opined that both Judy and Chad had died from multiple gunshot and stab wounds. Jason's body, Judy's youngest son, was discovered lying on its left side on the floor, at the foot of the bed on which his mother lay. He had not been shot. There were numerous defensive wounds on his hands. His neck had been slashed, and he had been stabbed in the chest and abdomen. 2 of the wounds to the abdomen had been fatal because they had cut major veins. His small bowel protruded from his body through these wounds. All of Jason's injuries had occurred before his death. The medical examiner testified that Jason had bled to death over a period of several minutes as a result of the multiple stab wounds. The 3 victims had been dead at least 12 hours before they were found. There were no signs of forcible entry into the house. The back door had been left open. There were signs of a struggle in the house, particularly the kitchen, where a leg had been broken off the table. A .22 caliber cartridge was found on the rug in the den. An identical type of bullet was removed from the bodies of Judy and Chad, who, ballistics experts determined, had been shot with the same gun. There were bullet holes in the walls of the front bedroom and the den. A path of splattered blood led from the den down the hall to the kitchen. Drops of blood in the bathroom indicated that someone had cleaned up in that room. All of the evidence connecting Smith to the killings of his estranged wife and stepchildren was circumstantial. The big question on everyone's mind was why Oscar committed this heinous crime. Let's go back a little into their backgrounds. Oscar and Judy Smith married on August 8, 1985. However, this wasn't his first. Frank Smith had 2 children from his previous marriage. Their names were Laura, an 18-year-old girl, and Merle, who was 15 years old. They lived with his parents in Pleasant View, Tennessee. Judy also had two sons named Chad and Jason. In December of 1986, Judy and Frank had twin boys, Chris and Casey. However, in June of 1989, the Smiths separated. A divorce action was pending at the time of the murders. Judy Smith had been awarded temporary custody of the twins, and Smith received visitation every other weekend. A key issue in the divorce was which parent would receive custody of the twins. Surprisingly, Judy, Chad, and Jason were afraid of Smith. On a fateful day, Frank and Jason fought at the trailer on his family's farm in Pleasant View. Frank had bitten Jason on the back and held a gun to his head. He had ordered Judy and the older boys out of the trailer and threatened to kill Judy if she tried to take the car or the twins, or if she took out a warrant or notified the police. In August 1989, when Judy returned to the trailer to retrieve her clothes, the car, and other items, Frank tied her up, sexually assaulted her, ran a knife across her throat, and told her he was going to kill her. At the time of the killings, warrants were pending charging Frank with aggravated assault based on these two incidents. During the summer of the same year, Frank called Judy several times at the Waffle House restaurant where she worked. According to a fellow employee who listened to the numerous phone calls at Judy's request, he had threatened to kill Judy. He told her he would shoot her and stab her. Once, he threatened to kill Chad and Jason because she was better to them than she was his twins. When Frank was picking up the twins for visitation 2 or 3 weeks before the murders, Frank told Judy's father, "You tell Judy that I've been playing with her with kid gloves, but now the gloves are coming off." On another occasion, he said that he would kill Judy if she ever left him. One of Frank's co-workers at Maintenance Service Corporation in La Vergne testified that in the early summer months of 1988, Frank offered to kill his wife if he would in turn kill Judy. 2 weeks later, Frank told his co-worker that they could plan the killings so that each man would be out of town when the other killed his wife. 1 month before Judy and her sons were killed, Frank asked another co-worker if he knew anyone who would kill his family. 2 weeks later, Frank told the same co-worker that he would offer $20,000 to have someone kill Judy and his 2 stepsons. Frank specified that his twins were not to be killed. When police first entered Judy Smith's house, they found a bloody palm print on the sheet beside Judy's body. A latent fingerprint examiner testified that it matched the palm print of Frank's left hand, which, like the print on the sheet, was missing the 2 middle fingers. Other circumstantial evidence connected Frank to the crime. A brown cottonwork glove found in the front bedroom resembled the gloves that Frank used. Frank also owned a .22 caliber revolver and was known to carry a large knife. He engaged in the craft of leatherworking, in which an awl is a basic tool used to punch holes or mark guidelines in leather. In March 1989, he had taken out a life insurance policy with American General on Judy for $20,000 and the boys for $10,000 each. In February of that same year, he had taken out a $20,000 policy on Judy and insured the boys for $5,000 each with Liberty National. He had earlier taken out a policy on Judy for $10,000 and the boys for $4,000 each with United Insurance. He thus was the beneficiary of $88,000 of life insurance on the lives of Judy and her 2 sons. Frank testified that on October 1, 1989, he drove to Nashville and met Judy, Chad, Jason, and the twins for breakfast at Shoney's restaurant. After breakfast, they went to the residence on Ludi Street, where Chad and Jason babysat the twins, while he and Judy looked for a used car for her. Frank and Judy visited a Waffle House at 140 and Charlotte Avenue that afternoon, sipping coffee until around 5 p.m. They then ate dinner at the Gold Rush restaurant and later stopped for coffee at another Waffle House at 124 in Harding Place. They remained here until 9:30 p.m. Subsequently, they returned to Judy's residence on Ludi Street. Chad and Jason came out to Frank's car with the twins. He then drove the twins back to his home in Pleasant View, which is approximately 31 miles from Judy's home. Judy called her sister about 10:30 p.m. and told her that Frank had taken the twins so that he could watch them the next day. This was to give her time to look for a car. The son-in-law of Judy Smith's neighbor at 318th Ludi Street testified that he saw Frank's white LTD parked at Judy's house around 11 or 11:15 that night. As part of his work as a machine tool repairman, Frank had to travel to Moorhead, Kentucky, to work on a machine the next day. His employer had instructed him to leave on Monday morning, but he had requested instead that he be allowed to leave Sunday, stay overnight, and then go to the customer's plant. Sometime during the early morning hours of Monday, October 2nd, he made the 260 to 300-mile trip to Moorhead in his white LTD. He repaired the machine at the customer's plant that Monday morning and returned to Pleasant View that afternoon. When picked up for an interview by law enforcement officers on the evening of October 2nd, Frank never asked why he was being questioned and spoke of his wife in the past tense before he was told of her death. Frank told officers he had gone out with Judy on Sunday to look for a car and claimed they were getting back together. He said he left Nashville with the twins around 9 to 9:30 p.m., arrived at his mother's house between 10 and 10:30 p.m., and left at approximately 10:30 p.m. for Kentucky. When told what had happened to his wife and stepchildren, he asked no questions about the circumstances of their deaths and displayed little emotion. The officers noticed his hand, elbow, back, and shoulder blade abrasions. Frank presented an alibi defense through his testimony and that of his family to save himself. He and his witnesses testified that he had been at his home in Pleasant View from 10 until 11:15 p.m. when he drove directly to Moorhead, Kentucky. He had suffered the abrasions when his dog had jumped on him upon his return home on Monday afternoon. Frank denied committing the murders, threatening his wife, or assaulting Judy and Jason. He claimed he was being framed and insisted that he and his wife had been reconciling. Frank and his witnesses denied that he owned an awl, a .22 caliber revolver, or a knife large enough to have caused the victim's wounds. He denied trying to hire someone to kill his wife. He had no idea how the bloody palm print, missing 2 fingers just like his own hand and identified by an expert as his print, came to be on the sheet next to his wife's body. He denied that he was at Judy Smith's residence on Ludi Street at 11:22 p.m. on October 1, 1989. However, the state said that Frank planned the homicides of his wife and stepsons. He had left the twins with his mother around 10:30 p.m., made the 30-minute drive back to his wife's home, committed the killings, and then driven to Moorhead, Kentucky. The jury obviously did not accept Frank's alibi defense and found Frank guilty of 3 counts of premeditated first-degree murder. The state presented the records of the 3 murder convictions, photographs of the bodies of Chad and Jason Burnett, and the testimony of the Assistant Davidson County Medical Examiner concerning the suffering of the victims. Frank presented personnel and an inmate from the Davidson County Jail, where he had been incarcerated since his arrest, to testify that he had been a good prisoner. Several of his co-workers testified that he was a good employee. His mother and his daughter from a previous marriage testified about his character and the fact he had a severely retarded teenage son who depended emotionally on him. There was evidence that Frank had suffered a nervous breakdown while on a business trip to Utah at some time in the past, and that he had been hospitalized for depression in April 1983. The psychiatrist who had treated him at the time testified that he exhibited symptoms of paranoia or hypervigilance and had an adjustment reaction. Dr. Jillian Blair, a clinical psychologist, had evaluated Frank in November 1989. She diagnosed him as suffering from a paranoid personality disorder, chronic depressive neurosis, and a paranoid delusional disorder. She described his family as dysfunctional because his father was a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. In rebuttal, the state presented the testimony of Dr. Leonard Morgan, a clinical psychologist from the D.D. Wallace Center, who had examined Frank to determine his competency to stand trial. Dr. Morgan opined that Frank was not suffering from any mental illness, only personality disorder, and was not delusional. He stated that Frank had told him he did not want to use an insanity defense because he would have trouble getting a home loan later. On July 26, 1990, a jury in Davidson County delivered a verdict that changed the course of Franklin Smith's life dramatically. He was sentenced to death. This stemmed from a high-profile trial that captured widespread attention. Over the years, as Smith awaited his execution, there were numerous developments and fluctuations in his case. Initially, he faced a scheduled execution date in June 2020. However, the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic led to widespread interruptions across the judicial system, which in turn resulted in the postponement of many executions, including Smith's. The pandemic created an unprecedented situation where health concerns and the need for safety took precedence, leading to further delays. After the June 2020 date was canceled, another execution was tentatively set for February 2021. Yet again, circumstances related to the ongoing pandemic forced authorities to reconsider and push back this date. The uncertainty surrounding the pandemic continued to dominate the legal landscape, leading to a backlog of cases and delays in the execution process. Eventually, after a protracted wait filled with anticipation and concern, Smith's execution was rescheduled for April 21, 2022. New date signified a culmination of 2 decades of legal battles, appeals, and the hope for a different outcome amid changing societal attitudes toward capital punishment and justice reform. In March 2022, Smith's legal team, consisting of attorneys from the prestigious Baker Botts law firm, submitted a clemency petition to the office of Tennessee Governor Bill Lee. In this petition, they made a compelling case for why Smith's current sentence should be reduced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The attorneys put forth various arguments, emphasizing factors such as Smith's background, the crime's circumstances, and any evidence of rehabilitation or remorse exhibited over the years. They called on the governor to consider not just the letter of the law, but also the broader implications of the sentence on Smith's life and the opportunities for reform. In April 2022, Smith filed a motion to reopen his case due to new DNA evidence found on a murder weapon. His lawyer, public defender Amy D. Harwell, said that DNA evidence shows that an unknown assailant, not Mr. Smith, used the bloody murder weapon found at the crime scene to murder Mr. Smith's family. Smith argues that he could not have presented the DNA evidence any sooner because the technology used to analyze the weapon is new. An investigator's fingerprint was also found on the awl. However, on April 11, 2022, a Tennessee court declined to reopen his case. On April 14, 2022, Smith asked the Tennessee Supreme Court to vacate his execution date. On April 18, 2022, the Tennessee Supreme Court declined to hear Smith's appeal and denied his request to vacate his execution date. On April 19, 2022, Tennessee's governor said that he would not intervene in Smith's execution. On April 21, 2022, his execution was postponed due to an oversight in the preparation for lethal injection. Governor Bill Lee issued the temporary reprieve and said, "Due to an oversight in preparation for lethal injection, the scheduled execution of Oscar Smith will not move forward tonight. I am granting a reprieve while we address the Tennessee Department of Correction protocol. Further details will be released when available." On May 2, 2022, Lee announced that on the day of Smith's scheduled execution, he became aware that the proper procedure for preparing lethal injection had not been followed correctly. The procedure involved testing for endotoxins, which had not been properly followed. The chemicals in the lethal injection had only been tested for potency and sterility, but not for endotoxins. Because of this, He suspended all executions in Tennessee for the remainder of the year and ordered a third-party review of the lethal injection process. This month, a new death warrant was signed for Smith, whose execution was rescheduled to be carried out on May 22, 2025. If you like the way we create these videos and you want us to bring more cases like this to light, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives.